So this morning, I want to explore consciousness. And in particular, I want to explore Unity's teaching on the four states of consciousness. Unity has a teaching. One of the early teachers from Unity, Emmett Fox, he wrote a book called Life is Consciousness. And he said, we have the key to life. And that key is the knowledge that life is a state of consciousness. All our problems, difficulties, and triumphs in life boil down to our state of consciousness. My teacher, Amma, would always say that when our hearts and minds are open, we receive grace, because grace is here. Grace is always here. And sometimes if we're not receiving grace, it's because we go into a room and we close the blinds and we shut the door and we turn off the lights and we say, it's so dark, when it's completely sunny and bright outside. And so to receive grace means we need to open, we need to attune, to tune ourselves to that divine grace that is always available. So exploring these levels of consciousness really helps us see where we are in any given time during the day. And we tend to vacillate between all these four levels. The first three levels of consciousness are victim, victor, and vessel. And I think it's safe to say that we vacillate between those three in particular. The fourth state is Verity consciousness. That is oneness. That is a non-dual state where I and the Father are one. That is our experience. In that experience, you can't even say me or I, right? There is just that I am, that I and the Father oneness. And it's called self-realization. It's called Christ consciousness or Buddha nature. So part of exploring consciousness, it's very important to not judge ourselves as we explore this. Paul Hasselbeck, another Unity minister, he wrote Heart-Centered Metaphysics, and he encourages looking at our states of consciousness with curiosity. He writes, we must learn to watch our consciousness, its impulses and desires, as the chemist watches his or her solutions. It's important to bring in compassion so that self-observation does not become self-condemnation. There's a big difference, isn't there, between self-observation and self-condemnation? Do you know the difference? So the first state that we want to explore, described as victim consciousness, that occurs when we believe and we feel that everything is happening to me. Everything is happening to me, and I'm at the mercy of the world, and I have very little or no control over what's happening to me. And of course, that can be developed in childhood, you know, especially children that aren't taught to be empowered, right? That you can feel, you know, dependent on the world around you as a child, and you can feel a victim. You can develop that level of consciousness as a child. The second level is victor consciousness, and that happens when we believe that we do have some control over what's happening in the world and the events around us, and we can affect our reality. So that is a very popular level of consciousness in kind of the New Age circles, is how we create our reality, right? Joe Dispenza and, you know, New Thought. New Thought is really all about how we use our thought to create reality. So that is a lot of the victor consciousness. Then the third level is vessel consciousness. And that, when we say, make me an instrument of thy peace, that's vessel consciousness. We're asking to be an instrument, right? And we're open, we're like the flute, and we're saying to the source, to unlimited consciousness, play me beautifully, use me, right? Use me in the most beautiful way possible. So that still has some feeling of separation from the greater reality, because we're saying there's still a me and a thee. Make me an instrument of thy peace, right? So finally, there is Verity consciousness. And Eckhart Tolle, I like the way he puts it. He calls it a state of felt oneness. A state of felt oneness, the non-dual state. We've probably all had moments of that. Maybe you've had a long drink of that, if you're very fortunate. I love the book, I Am That, Nisargadatta. Anybody read that book? It's a big, thick book, but it's such a great book. And Nisargadatta describes Verity consciousness this way. He says, the consciousness in you and the consciousness in me, apparently two, really one, seek unity, and that is love. I cannot see you but as myself. It is the very nature of love to see no difference. When you're around Amma, you really see her seeing this way. You know, that she sees only herself in all of humanity. She sees only God in all of humanity and serves that self and loves that self. And it's unconditional. It's the same for everybody. It's like the way the sun shines. It doesn't just shine on the good and not shine on the bad, right? It doesn't shine on the unconscious any less than the conscious, right? So that is that oneness consciousness. It has its unconditional love itself. So to have this direct experience that I am all that is, and there's nothing outside the self I am. I and the Father are one. Hinduism calls that samadhi, and Buddhism calls it nirvana. And nirvana, Sanskrit word, literally means the quenching of the activity of the grasping mind. The quenching of the activity of the grasping mind and its related unease. It is described as freedom from suffering and freedom from samsara. Samsara, there's another Sanskrit word I love. Samsara means wandering. Do you ever feel like you're wandering? It actually means wandering in a circle. But it's a long circle. It's the circle of birth, life, death, birth, life, death, birth, life, death, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So samsara literally means running around in circles. But there is freedom from samsara. It is possible, and it is through this attaining the state of oneness that never wavers. And I think as we're journeying, a lot of us are really having more and more taste of oneness. And I think that a spiritual life is just how many moments can we keep adding up till we're just stabilized, right, in a greater consciousness. That's our normal, right? That's what all spiritual practice is moving us towards. When you go see Amma, like I just spent time with, her name is Mata Amritanandamayi, for those of you who don't know, she's the hugging saint. And I was just in retreat with her a few weeks ago. But when you're with her, everything is all about developing your consciousness to have that experience of oneness. You meditate, you pray, you get still, you chant scripture, you purify your mind, you purify your heart, you serve others. It's so great. I love it when I get put to work and I'm serving food, because all of a sudden I feel like I just dissolve into the we be, right? We're like we instead of me, you know, when I feel that I'm part of this one beautiful awakening humanity. So over the years, I've worked with amazing spiritual teachers. I feel super lucky to have worked with amazing people. And what I would say about most of them, not so much Amma, but not Amma, but these many teachers that I've worked with, is they have had taste of oneness consciousness. And they've written books from that state, many. But they're still maybe sometimes vacillating back into a consciousness of separate identity. I would say that about myself, honestly, you know, to be perfectly honest, and that's okay. And that's where we don't judge. We don't judge ourselves for that. You know, it's a process. It's evolution in process, right? We're on an adventure in consciousness. But the message from Amma, from Jesus, from Yogananda, from the Buddha, from all the masters, is pointing to a permanent freedom from suffering that doesn't come after death. It's while you're living that you discover it, okay? That verity consciousness. Know thyself. Know thyself. Nisargadatta wrote, fight with all the strength at your disposal against the idea that you are nameable and describable. You are not. Refuse to think of yourself in terms of this or that, but rather, I am. I am. So the way that we make progress towards this freedom is through becoming more self-aware and watching ourselves and developing the witness, the observer. Those are good names for it, right? Like when I watch myself all the time. And when I watch myself at the piano, if I'm really in the zone, I lose touch with the personal self. I definitely drop into vessel. And music just plays me, right? It just comes through. And I go, wow, that was cool. Right? I'm just out of the way. You know, you got to learn the skills, right? You learn the skills, but then once you got that, you can just get out of the way and music plays you, and you really are an instrument of peace, of beauty, right? Of light. And you're able to use that skill to bless others. It's funny, and then if I get really still in meditation, I can go into like a little mini samadhi, and I can feel just the oneness. And then when I walk over here and I start to talk to you, I seem to have to bring a personal self back, right? If I'm going to tell you stories, I got to bring a personal self back. So there's a lot of moving around in consciousness. You know, it's very fluid. We are very fluid. So if you explore the words of Jesus, you know, he was in Verity consciousness when he said, I and the Father are one. But it's interesting, like when you read his experience the night before he died, when he said, Father, take this cup from me, there's a Father and there's a me. And maybe there's even a sense of feeling the victim. It's okay, we don't have to make that bad or wrong to feel the victim. You know, he might have felt, wow, I'm going to be victimized tomorrow by a very unconscious humanity, you know, a mob. So he could have been in that victim consciousness. But then when he was leaving his body, his last breath, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. So that is emerging into the oneness. That is the dissolving of me into thee. Like you can be the instrument, but then you can dissolve the me into thee. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we can watch ourselves shifting in and out of different states, and that's how we become more conscious. Have you been watching the Olympics? Oh my gosh, Simone Biles. Oh my goodness, I'm such a fan. And you probably, you know, you might know her story. You know, she withdrew 4 years ago from the Olympics. She was having a difficult time. She was having the twisties, which is a condition of mind-body disconnect that gymnasts get. And when you learn about her life, it wasn't easy. She had a mother who was addicted to drugs, and she was in foster care a lot. And she described how, you know, when the 2020 Olympics were happening, COVID was raging. So she couldn't have her mom, her grandmother, there. And she felt very alone. She felt an extreme amount of pressure. And her confidence wavered, and her self-doubt kicked in. And it brought on that mind-body disconnect. And it was quite a demanding journey for her to recover. And she didn't know if she would ever compete again, right? So she could have felt a victim. And maybe she did for a little bit. You know, maybe she did spend some time feeling victimized by her childhood, or the pressure of being an elite athlete. People love you and then they hate you. She said they love you while you're striving, and then when you win, they hate you, which is so strange. Humans are strange sometimes. But, you know, she demonstrated lifting herself out of staying in that victim consciousness. And that's what we love. We love reflections of that. You know, she believed in herself, and she took responsibility, this is key, to creating the healing she needed to be a victor, to be victorious. So for us in life to shift when something's really challenging, when something challenging has happened, it often takes a lot of work, right? And it takes a commitment to uprooting old beliefs, right? It takes believing that, we can overcome. And we have what it takes to change our lives. The truth is, we do have what it takes. We have consciousness. Even better said, we are consciousness. And that's a superpower. We can create life anew with the consciousness we are, right? So with Simone, she became deeply committed to her mental health. And she did weekly therapy to work on herself, understand herself. And she continues that to this day. She was talking about the whole time she's been in Paris. She's been in touch with her therapist. So I have so much respect for that. So we can examine the thoughts that are self-defeating. Very important to do that and change them and become aware of our thinking, right? To observe it. Wayne Dyer speaks on this. He wrote, "When expectations are shattered, practice allowing that to be the way it is. Relax, let go, allow, and recognize that some of your desires are about how you think the world should be, rather than how it is in this moment." And then he says, become an astute observer. Become the witness. Judge less, listen more. Take time to open your mind to the fascinating mystery and uncertainty that we all experience. Right, Simone had a tattoo, has a tattoo of a Maya Angelou poem with the words, "And still I rise." I love that. If I get a tattoo, that would be a good one. But she says that is the epitome of her story and her career, that she will rise to the occasion. We all have that affirmative power. We can use what life brings to grow. We can embrace and accept what is and carry on. Carry on. We might fall down 1,000,000 times, but we get back up. We can get back up again and again and rise. So our spiritual growth, our work is to move from victim consciousness to victor. And then there is going beyond that to vessel consciousness. The thing about victor consciousness that we can kind of get trapped in wanting to manifest, right? I think that when The Secret, that movie was around and everybody was like, I'm gonna manifest $1 million and a car and a house and everything. And it's, and parking spots. Right. It's a place we can get stuck, because you're manipulating. You want to manipulate reality. I think that it's really great to become powerful at using your mind to create reality, but that next level of vessel, that includes surrendering. And that's like this higher level of letting life use you. Michael Singer was my first teacher. I met him when I was 15. And I would go to this temple outside of Gainesville, Florida in the woods, and I would hear him speak 3 times a week. He gave talks 3 times a week for many years. And he would talk about how our spiritual work is learning to live life without stress, problems, fear, or melodrama. And he would describe how it's possible to live in a state of surrender, a state in non-resistance to what is. And I have to say, that is my huge practice these days. My constant practice is non-resistance, non-attachment, and letting go of fear. Because, like the Buddhists say, without fear and attachment, know the sweet joy of the way, right? So, it's to surrender to what is and not fight it, to accept it and work with it, right? And that takes observing your defeatist thoughts, right? It does take that. Uprooting them. And that's where we bring in the affirmative prayer and the affirmative thinking. Very important to learn that. And change our conditioning, uproot the self-sabotaging thoughts and old conditioning, the feelings of guilt and shame and unforgiveness. Joe Dispenza, he loves to talk about the shift that we make when we become more conscious from survival to creating our life. You know what it is to live in survival. We've probably all been there. He talks about that as having a lot of stress, fear, anger, sadness, dis-ease, imbalance. But there's creation living, and that is order, I love order. I love when my house is in order, my closet is in order, my life's in order. Creation living is regeneration and trust, love, joy, growth, and repair. It's about learning to believe in one's capacity as a divine human. So Joe writes, given that your personality comprises how you think, act, and feel, you must pay attention to your unconscious thoughts, reflexive behaviors, and automatic emotional reactions. Put them under observation, determine if they're true, and whether you want to continue to endorse them with your energy. I like that. What are we endorsing with our energy? What thoughts are we endorsing with our energy? What beliefs about ourselves are we endorsing? Joe, he always does these great exercises. I've done some conferences with him. But he likes to say, what would it be like to, it's just a beautiful way to open your mind. What would it be like to, and then answer that blank with wonderfulness, right? With something that would make you really happy. What would it be like to wake up and feel good about myself and create this day so that it brings me a feeling of happiness, right? What would it be like to? So we can replace defeating thoughts with empowering thoughts. Let's practice some affirmations right now. Would you repeat after me? I am worthy.
I am worthy.
I release self-judgment now.
I release self-judgment now.
I create a day I feel good about.
I create a day I feel good about.
I deserve happiness and well-being.
I deserve happiness and well-being.
Do you believe it? Oh. Joe says, when you find yourself thinking an old unconscious thought that makes you feel miserable, say out loud, change. Let's all say that together. Change, yes. and to realize that you're not being loving to yourself with that thought. That you deserve happiness, you deserve well-being. Let that be your mantra. So one last teaching. This is a longer talk, but I just love this subject. I think it's really important. There's a teaching from Eckhart Tolle, and he says, if you're unhappy with the situation, there's only 3 sane choices. What are they? Change it. What's 2? Accept it. What's 3? Leave it. Yeah, he says, see if you can catch yourself complaining, either in thought or speech, about a situation you find yourself in. Maybe it's what other people do or say, or your surroundings, your life situation, even the weather. To complain is always non-acceptance of what is. It invariably carries an unconscious negative charge. When you complain, you make yourself into a victim. When you speak out, you are in your power, right? So change the situation by taking action or by speaking out if necessary or possible, or leave the situation or accept it. All else is madness. It's a powerful thing to contemplate. It doesn't always apply. I mean, I think about, say, children that are stuck in Ukraine, right? And the bombing's happening. There are those exceptions. But mostly, us here living in this first world country, we can do these 3 things. We can change it, we can leave it, we can accept it, right? I've done a lot of counseling over the years, being a minister at 3 different spiritual centers, and I would on occasion have people come and they would complain and they would be so upset and angry about something, but they were not interested in changing it. And it reminds me of a funny meme that I saw. It says, I feel like I have all this anger inside, but no one's special to share it with, right? So I like to share that teaching because it's really, it gets to the point. It's really helpful. So briefly, again, that 4th level of consciousness, that verity consciousness, that non-dual state of consciousness, that is what we are moving towards. That's where we feel ourselves as a drop of ocean, and then all of a sudden we merge in the ocean and we feel ourselves as the ocean. We feel ourselves as all that is. Nisargadatta, he writes so beautifully about it. You can tell he's in that samadhi, in the sahaja samadhi, that is permanent samadhi. He says, our usual attitude is, I am this. But he says, consistently and perseveringly separate the I am from this or that. Right? And try to feel what it means to be without being this or being that. Right? I remember going on a hike in Mount Shasta to Cliff Lake with my girlfriend, very conscious friend of mine. And we were talking about identity and how we, in that state of all that is, we're not separate from anything. And I found that when you use adjectives, you tend to separate yourselves from things. And you separate things out. You make it beautiful, you make it ugly, you make it good, you make it bad. So for the whole day, we just practiced not using adjectives. Basically, we didn't talk at all. Which was perfect. We were just being. We were being all that we are. So our spiritual destiny is really to live in this highest state of consciousness, giving our life to that, I love that teaching from Jesus, when thine eye is single, thy whole being shall be filled with the light of consciousness. When we single-minded want that more than anything, because this world's distracting. It'll draw your attention outward, outward, outward. And of course, the kingdom of heaven is where? Within. Right, the consciousness. It's within. We have to turn within. So in closing, I hope this has been food for thought for you. It's such a great subject. I promised the prayer chaplains last week I would speak on this because it's so helpful in understanding and learning to be the witness, the observer, as we watch ourselves go through the day. Like, what state of consciousness am I at now, right? Where am I? And we are the creators of our happiness. That's the shift out of victim. That's where we start realizing we can grow our well-being by expanding our consciousness. There are very solid ways to do that. We do it here every Sunday. So may you and all beings awaken to your destiny as infinite consciousness. And may all beings be at peace, and may all beings be happy. Om Shanti. Thank you all.